we're going to see so many people go into the transfer portal this week. Like we thought it's going to be a feeding frenzy. And I have no doubt for your alma mater that Deion is going to bring a bunch of talent, not just with him from Jackson State, but a bunch of other guys. They're going to dramatically upgrade a roster that I think they have so far to go because that was a worst roster in Power 5. But I look at it as I think he will make the kind of leap Jed Fish at least did at Arizona, where going from awful to dangerous within the first year.
That's an interesting one because and I think for Buffs fans, in a utopian scenario, it'd be even better than that. That the roster could do even more than maybe Arizona. But that's a good one. I want to sit with Deion. And granted, I was close to it, so I know a lot of the same things that you do. But this whole process, what can you tell me about the way that you learned that it's all ironed out and played out?
I mean, for the last couple of weeks, you were hearing just from the sources I was talking to that CU was going all in on Deion. And what does going all in mean in this case? And this, you and I have talked about this a little bit, I think last week, where it related to some stuff I'd heard from the guys on the current staff. And when I mean the current staff, I mean who were there in 2022 and even before that, where it's hard to get transfers into CU. And one of the examples somebody had made to me was a kid at a really high academic school who had a really high GPA, and they were like, we can't even get him in. And it was too specific of an example for me to go, that doesn't seem right. So in order for them to take full advantage of the portal, in order for them really to make it worth Deion's while, I think there were going to have to be, I don't even know if I want to call it some concessions. There was going to have to be made some significant adjustments. And I think the wow factor to me on this, it doesn't surprise me that Colorado would look at its situation. And as you all know, I mean, there's basically been one really good year in like the last 15 years. It was the year with Mike McIntyre, take away the shortened season of the pandemic, but it has been a huge struggle. And they've lost a ton of players to the portal. I mean, we did a game at TCU, really good safety, former Buff. Obviously USC has a defensive back, former CU player. There's a handful of guys out there, and they weren't getting it back. And so it doesn't surprise me that Colorado would go all in for Deion for the potential that he could bring. What I was wondering about was, will some bigger school that has had more recent success, maybe closer to where he has been based, which is in the Southeast, would they swoop in? And, you have these jobs open, Georgia Tech, Auburn, even USF. I know USF is not a Power 5 job, but it's one where you'd say, all right, he can go there, bring a bunch of players. He might win the league in a year, right? Or definitely in 2 years. And then he springboards to something else bigger. But as we got closer to this week, we had reported on Big Noon a week ago that not only had CU offered, but Deion was legitimately considering it. I kept on hearing from people going, this thing is a go. It's happening, and more. And as you got further into the process, you're like, wow, I could see it from CU's standpoint. You just weren't sure it was Deion, because Deion is different than a lot of these other. He's different from all the other coaching candidates. But what is also different is Deion's not a Jimmy Sexton guy. He's not a Trace Armstrong guy. And those are prominent coach agents. Jimmy Sexton represents like almost the entire roster of SEC head coaches. So I'm not saying that like it's always goes kind of according to form, but Deion's more of a wild card. And for them to get across the finish line was, it's still kind of surreal. And I watched the press conference on Sunday, and I was saying to my colleague Stuart Mandel, who I do work on the Audible with, I said, I don't know who I think is the second most charismatic FBS head coach, but there's a huge gap between Deion and everybody else. I just can't imagine how he is not going to clean up in recruiting, because, he was a Hall of Fame player, but he is such a dynamic personality. There's a mentorship quality to him. I did a column that we went with Saturday night that, I'd worked on a little earlier with Mike McCartney, who you well know, is Bill McCartney's son, has been in the business for a long time, knows that program well. And he just said, you know what? My dad always said, if we can just get him here, being obviously to Boulder, I think we got a really good chance. And he said, I think what's going to happen with Deion is there'll be kids who will be like, well, we don't have CU in our top 2 or 3, but man, it's Deion. Let me just go meet him. Let me see what he's about. Let me just try to make that connection. And then he goes, he gets them there, and then he's going to get them. And I
Yeah.
totally could see that happening.
I got to be honest. And I know that I'm totally biased on this. It's going to work. He's going to get great players to go to Colorado. They've come before. They've got a Heisman Trophy. They've got a national championship. They've got Thorpe Award winners and Butkus Award winners in their history. So it can happen. Just like you were talking with Mike McCartney about it. You get the players there, they'll stay, and he's going to get them there. And you're absolutely right about just the personality. There is no close second. There is like Deion, go down to 99 and then start the list. A line like, listen, I don't need to be nervous, or I'm not nervous because of my confidence. And then he said, my confidence is like my cologne. I'm butchering the lines, but this stuff was so good from a head coaching perspective. A couple of things that I want to touch on that you touched on. The transfer issue at Colorado, they have addressed it and fixed it. And the Chancellor Phil DeStefano talked about it in their press conference. The bottom line was this: it's not about some sort of outlandish academic requirement to get in. The problem is that at Colorado, there wasn't a general education degree. Because of that, any credit that would fall under that, so any sort of PE credit, so it doesn't matter if it's from a really good school or not, there was just not a spot for it at Colorado. They have fixed that now, both for athletes and non-athletes. That's going to help them in the transfer portal a great deal, Bruce. And then the last part that I would just say is I'm so interested in is, what does his staff make up? As you and I both know, a head coach, he's certainly driving the bus, but it matters who is on the bus with him. And so I'm really interested to see and kind of feel and talk with the guys that he hires as his assistants there at Colorado. The sky's going to be the limit there. They're talking about expectations almost immediately. And this is the type of guy that I wouldn't bet against him, Bruce, that he's going to transform this roster very quickly.